You think you're in control as you scroll, but do you ever wonder who is pulling the strings behind your urgency? Picture this. It's 2:17 a.m., and Anna lies in her bed, her thumb moving mechanically across her phone screen. The blue light bathes her face in an ethereal glow as she refreshes her newsfeed for the 7th time in the past hour. Her heart races with each headline, each update, each notification that pulls her deeper into a spiral of anxiety and compulsion. What if I told you that every swipe, every shocking headline, every doom-laden update is a carefully calibrated drip of dopamine designed to keep you addicted and anxious? What if I told you that Anna's story is your story, and that behind every refresh lies a sophisticated system designed to harvest your attention, your peace, and ultimately your presence? Tonight, we journey into the shadows of our digital dependencies, where algorithms know us better than we know ourselves, and where the line between staying informed and staying trapped has become dangerously thin. So, welcome to a world where our minds are primed for chaos, and our hearts beat faster at every breaking news notification. This is the age of doom-scrolling dopamine, a silent epidemic where infinite news feeds hijack our sense of time, urgency, and safety. We live in an era where global catastrophes stream directly into our palms, where distant wars feel as immediate as the coffee brewing in our kitchen, and where the boundaries between our personal reality and the world's collective trauma have dissolved entirely. Anna discovered this 6 months ago, though she couldn't name it yet. She had always considered herself socially conscious, someone who cared deeply about the world's suffering. "I need to stay informed," she would tell herself, as she scrolled through images of conflict zones over breakfast, absorbed refugee statistics during her lunch break, and consumed climate change updates before bed. Her empathy, once her greatest strength, had become the very hook that pulled her deeper into digital quicksand. In this spiral, each update fuels a collective anxiety. Wars, elections, pandemics, crises that seem to multiply and intensify with each passing moment. Algorithms know exactly what to feed you next, a carefully curated diet of fear and urgency, designed to keep your eyes glued, your nervous system engaged, and your sense of power systematically diminished. The platforms understand something profound about human psychology. We are evolutionarily wired to pay attention to threats. Our ancestors who ignored the rustling bushes didn't survive to pass on their genes. But those same neural pathways that once protected us from saber-toothed tigers now make us vulnerable to an entirely different kind of predator, one that doesn't want to eat our flesh, but to consume our time, our attention, and our peace. Today, we journey into the shadow of our own compulsions, following Anna's path from digital dependency to conscious presence. We'll explore why we seek bad news like moths to flame, how our nervous system became attuned to perpetual emergencies, and what we can do to reclaim our peace in a world that profits from our panic. Stay with me, because in the dark mirror of your scrolling, there's a deeper truth waiting to awaken. Anna found it, and so can you. Do you feel it? That restless energy that pulls at your consciousness like an undertow, drawing you back to your device again and again? That persistent sense that something important is happening somewhere and you might be missing it. Anna felt it most acutely in the quiet moments. During her morning coffee, before the day's responsibilities demanded her attention, she would find her thumb automatically navigating to her phone. Just a quick check, she would whisper to herself, as if speaking the lie quietly enough would make it true. But there was nothing quick about it. What began as a 2-minute news check would stretch into 20 minutes, then 40, then an hour of scrolling through an endless stream of suffering. Wars in countries she'd never visited, political conflicts in languages she didn't speak, environmental disasters in places she'd never see. All of it flowing through her consciousness like a dark river of human anguish. You are not alone in this restlessness. Millions of us wake up in the night to check what we missed, jolting our brains awake with every alert. We reach for our phones before our feet touch the floor each morning, seeking that first hit of information that will orient us to the world's current state of crisis. This is the collective restlessness of our time, woven by algorithms and reinforced by our primal urge to stay informed, or more truthfully, to stay prepared for danger. But what danger, exactly? What are we preparing for as we scroll through images of distant catastrophes and read about problems so vast and complex that no individual action could possibly address them? Anna began to notice the physical sensation that accompanied her scrolling. Her shoulders would creep up toward her ears. Her breathing would become shallow. Her jaw would clench unconsciously as she absorbed each new piece of troubling information. Her body was responding as if each headline represented a personal threat, even though she sat safely in her apartment thousands of miles away from the conflicts she was consuming. The restlessness wasn't just mental. It was deeply somatic, woven into the very fabric of her nervous system. Her body had learned to associate peace with danger, calm with ignorance, and rest with irresponsibility. The very act of not checking her phone had begun to feel like a moral failing. But Anna's compulsion wasn't a personal weakness. It was the intended outcome of the most sophisticated behavioral modification system ever created. Social media platforms, news aggregators, and even search engines are built on a single, immutable truth. Attention is currency. The longer they keep your gaze, the more ads you see, the more data they mine, the more revenue they generate. Your distraction is their profit. Your anxiety is their asset. To achieve this, they harness the oldest, most primitive part of your brain, the amygdala, your fear center. This almond-shaped cluster of neurons evolved over millions of years to keep you alive in a world filled with immediate physical threats. It doesn't understand the difference between a saber-toothed tiger and a sensationalized headline. It simply responds to perceived danger with the same neurochemical cascade that once saved your ancestors from predators. Every shocking update is a hook carefully baited with your own biology. Every breaking banner is a lure designed to trigger your threat detection system. Every contradictory opinion, every inflammatory comment, every piece of outrage-inducing content is a spark deliberately lit to ignite your fight or flight response. Anna discovered this truth gradually through her own painful experience. She began to notice patterns in her consumption habits. The stories that captured her attention weren't necessarily the most important or impactful. They were the most emotionally provocative. The headlines that made her click weren't those offering nuanced analysis or constructive solutions. They were the ones that triggered immediate emotional responses: fear, anger, disgust, or moral outrage. The algorithms had learned her psychological profile better than she knew it herself. They knew she was most likely to engage with content between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m., when her emotional defenses were lowered by fatigue. They knew she was drawn to stories about social injustice, environmental catastrophe, and political conflict. They knew exactly which emotional buttons to press to keep her scrolling, and they pressed them with surgical precision. In a world overwhelmed with information, the easiest path to hold your attention is to trigger your fight or flight response. So the feeds are infinite, designed never to end, never to satisfy, never to provide the sense of completion that might allow you to step away. The headlines are crafted for extremes. Everything is either shocking, devastating, unprecedented, or historic. The comment sections are seeded with conflict, designed to draw you into digital battles that have no winners and no resolution. It's not a bug in the system, it's the business model itself. So, to understand how Anna became trapped, we must first understand the three fundamental ways that doom scrolling exploits our evolutionary psychology and physiology. The negativity bias, our ancient alarm system. Deep within your brain lies an evolutionary inheritance that once meant the difference between life and death.
the negativity bias. This cognitive phenomenon means that negative information captures and holds our attention far more powerfully than positive information. Your ancestors, who paid careful attention to potential threats, the shadow that might be a predator, the sound that might signal danger, were more likely to survive and reproduce. In our modern digital environment, this ancient alarm system has become a liability. News organizations discovered long ago that if it bleeds, it leads. Stories of conflict, catastrophe, and crisis capture our attention more reliably than stories of progress, cooperation, and hope. The algorithms that govern our feeds have learned to exploit this bias with unprecedented sophistication, serving us an endless stream of threats that trigger our attention without ever resolving into actionable information. Anna experienced this bias firsthand. She could scroll past dozens of positive stories, scientific breakthroughs, acts of kindness, community successes, without pausing, but let one headline mention conflict, disaster, or injustice, and her attention would lock onto it like a heat-seeking missile. Her brain, doing exactly what evolution designed it to do, was being systematically exploited by systems designed to capture and monetize her focus. Information overload and compassion fatigue, when caring becomes toxic. Anna's empathy, once her greatest strength, had become a source of overwhelming distress. This wasn't a personal failing. It was a predictable response to what psychologists call information overload combined with compassion fatigue. Our brains evolved to process the suffering of maybe 150 people, the size of a typical hunter-gatherer tribe. We were designed to care deeply about the people we could actually help, whose faces we knew, whose stories we could follow to completion. Our capacity for empathy was meant to be local, immediate, and actionable. But in our hyper-connected world, we're exposed to the suffering of millions simultaneously. Every scroll exposes us to more tragedy than our ancestors might have encountered in a lifetime. Our emotional processing systems, never designed for this scale of input, begin to malfunction. We experience the psychological equivalent of a traffic jam, too much information trying to move through pathways designed for much lighter loads. The result is compassion fatigue, a state of physical and emotional exhaustion caused by caring for others who are experiencing trauma or suffering. Originally identified in healthcare workers and humanitarian aid professionals, compassion fatigue is now a widespread phenomenon affecting anyone regularly exposed to global suffering through digital media. Anna felt this fatigue as a heavy weight in her chest, a sense of drowning in problems too vast to solve. She cared deeply about climate change, but felt helpless in the face of melting glaciers and rising sea levels. She was moved by stories of refugees, but overwhelmed by the scale of global displacement. Her empathy, instead of connecting her to meaningful action, had become a source of paralysis and despair. Cortisol, the stress hormone that never rests. The physiological impact of constant doom scrolling centers on cortisol, often called the stress hormone. In small doses, cortisol is beneficial. It helps us respond to immediate threats by increasing alertness and mobilizing energy. But chronic cortisol elevation, the kind that results from constant exposure to stressful information, wreaks havoc on both our physical and mental health. Each time Anna encountered alarming news, her adrenal glands released cortisol into her bloodstream. In a natural stress response, cortisol levels would spike briefly and then return to baseline once the threat passed. But in the world of infinite scroll, the threats never end. Each refresh brings new disasters, new crises, new reasons for her body to maintain a state of high alert. Chronic cortisol elevation disrupts sleep, impairs memory and concentration, suppresses immune function, and contributes to anxiety and depression. It affects blood sugar regulation, increases inflammation, and can lead to weight gain, particularly around the midsection. Anna's body was paying a physical price for her psychological entrapment. She began to notice the symptoms: difficulty falling asleep after late-night scrolling sessions, trouble concentrating during the day, a persistent sense of tension in her body, and an immune system that seemed constantly compromised. Her doctor couldn't find anything wrong, but Anna intuitively understood that her digital habits were making her sick. The moment of awakening for Anna came on a Tuesday evening in October.
She had been scrolling for over an hour, absorbing story after story of global crisis, when she suddenly became aware of her own body. Her heart was racing, as if she were running from danger. Her breathing had become shallow and rapid. Her hands were trembling slightly as they held her phone. And yet, she was sitting safely in her living room, surrounded by the comfortable familiarity of her own belongings. The disconnect between her body's emergency response and her actual circumstances was so stark that it broke through her digital trance like a cold splash of water. This was Anna's first glimpse behind the curtain of her own conditioning. She began to observe the mechanics of her compulsion with scientific curiosity rather than moral judgment. Each time she refreshed for bad news, her brain released a tiny hit of dopamine, a neurochemical reward that whispered, "You found something important." But what was she really finding? Another horror, another tragedy, another reason to tighten her chest and furrow her brow. The importance was manufactured, the urgency artificial, the sense of duty misplaced. This endless loop had trained her nervous system to seek crises. Her body had begun to associate calm moments with boredom or even anxiety, craving the next spike of adrenaline that would make her feel alert and engaged. Peace had become uncomfortable. Chaos had become familiar. And so she scrolled, and so she scrolled, and so she scrolled. But awareness changes everything. Once Anna could see the mechanism of her entrapment, she could begin to question it. She started to notice the subtle ways her phone commanded her attention, the carefully crafted notifications designed to create urgency, the variable reward schedule that kept her checking obsessively, the social proof mechanisms that made her feel obligated to stay informed about every global crisis. She realized that her doomscrolling wasn't actually making her more informed. It was making her more anxious. The information she consumed wasn't actionable. It was simply emotionally reactive. She wasn't becoming a better global citizen through her digital consumption. She was becoming a more distressed and less capable human being. The path out of digital dependency began with what Anna came to think of as seeing through the spell, recognizing the manipulation every time your thumb hovers over the screen, understanding the code behind your compulsions. What if you could sense the invisible strings every time they're pulled? What if you could feel the algorithm's gentle pressure directing your attention like a skilled pickpocket directing your gaze? Anna began to develop what she called her digital literacy practices, simple techniques for maintaining conscious choice in her digital consumption. The body scan practice. Before opening any news app or social media platform, Anna would pause and check in with her body. She would notice, does my breath shorten as I anticipate reading alarming news? Does my body tense when I see headlines framed in absolutes? Do I feel the compulsion to consume and share before I pause to question? This simple practice of somatic awareness became her early warning system, alerting her when she was about to enter a state of reactive consumption rather than conscious choice. The intention check. Anna began asking herself specific questions before engaging with digital content. What am I hoping to find or accomplish by scrolling right now? Is this information actionable, or am I consuming it for emotional reasons? Will engaging with this content make me more capable of creating positive change in the world? Am I seeking information or seeking stimulation? These questions helped her distinguish between genuine information seeking and compulsive consumption. The time boundary practice. Anna discovered that one of the most effective ways to break the spell of infinite scroll was to impose artificial endings on naturally endless streams. She began setting specific times for news consumption, 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the evening, and using a timer to enforce these boundaries. This practice revealed how much of her previous consumption had been unconscious. Without the timer, 15 minutes could easily stretch to 2 hours. With the timer, she found she could stay informed about genuinely important developments while protecting herself from the endless stream of outrage and anxiety. The source curation practice. Perhaps most importantly,
Anna began to curate her information sources deliberately, rather than passively consuming whatever the algorithm served her. She sought out journalists and publications known for nuanced, solutions-oriented reporting. She followed accounts that shared hopeful stories alongside troubling ones. She deliberately included voices that offered historical perspective, helping her understand current events in the context of broader human patterns, rather than as unprecedented catastrophes. This shift in her information diet had profound effects on her mental state. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by an endless stream of crises, she began to see current events as part of larger human stories, some tragic, some hopeful, all part of the complex tapestry of human experience.
The transformation didn't happen overnight, but as Anna practiced these new ways of relating to information, she began to rediscover something she had lost without realizing it: her own inner rhythm. For months, her emotional state had been determined by external events completely beyond her control. Wars in distant countries affected her mood more than the weather outside her window. Political developments in far-off capitals had more impact on her daily experience than the relationships in her own life. This surrender of emotional sovereignty had seemed noble, evidence of her global consciousness and social awareness, but Anna began to recognize it as a form of spiritual bypassing, a way of avoiding the more challenging work of creating positive change in her own life and immediate community. The world has always been chaotic, but your soul was not designed to process the pain of billions in real time. You were made to witness the sunrise, to hear your own thoughts in silence, to nurture what you can actually touch and influence. Anna began to understand this distinction viscerally. As she reduced her consumption of global crisis information, she found herself more present to local opportunities for positive action. She volunteered at a nearby food bank, joined a community garden project, and began mentoring young people in her neighborhood. These actions felt more meaningful and impactful than sharing articles about distant crises ever had. Practical steps for digital wellness. To reclaim herself, Anna developed a comprehensive approach to digital wellness. Intentional feed curation. She unfollowed accounts that consistently triggered anxiety without offering constructive perspectives. She actively sought out sources that balanced honest reporting with historical context and potential solutions. She followed accounts that inspired hope, nuance, and constructive engagement with complex issues. Scheduled information consumption. Rather than allowing news to interrupt her day unpredictably, Anna established specific times for information consumption. She checked news twice daily, once in the morning to stay informed about significant developments, and once in the evening to catch up on important stories. Outside these windows, she kept her phone in airplane mode or in another room. Somatic grounding practices. Anna learned to recognize the physical signs of information overwhelm and developed techniques for returning to her body and breath. When she felt the familiar tightness in her chest or shallowness in her breathing, she would place her hand on her heart, take 5 deep breaths, and remind her nervous system that she was safe in the present moment. Digital Sabbath. Anna instituted a weekly digital Sabbath, 24 hours completely disconnected from news and social media. Initially, this practice felt anxiety-provoking. She worried about missing important developments or being uninformed about current events. But she discovered that taking regular breaks from information consumption actually enhanced her ability to process and respond thoughtfully to important news when she did encounter it. Replacement rituals. Rather than simply eliminating digital consumption, Anna replaced her scrolling habits with activities that nourished her spirit and connected her to her immediate environment. She replaced morning doomscrolling with meditation and journaling. She replaced evening news consumption with reading books, taking walks, or engaging in creative projects. You are more than your fears. You are more than your anxieties about distant events beyond your control. You are the calm in the storm, the peace that exists independent of external circumstances. The world may rage outside, but within you, there is a sanctuary no headline can breach. This sanctuary isn't built through ignorance or denial. It's cultivated through conscious choice, intentional attention, and the wisdom to distinguish between what you can influence and what you must accept. The deepest transformation in Anna's journey wasn't technical, it was philosophical. She began to understand the difference between global awareness and global absorption, between staying informed and staying overwhelmed. The digital age had created an unprecedented situation in human history. We can know about every tragedy, every injustice, every crisis happening anywhere on Earth in real time. This capability feels like a moral imperative. Surely, awareness equals responsibility. If we can know about suffering, don't we have an obligation to consume that knowledge? But Anna began to question this assumption. She realized that her compulsive consumption of global suffering wasn't actually helping anyone. It wasn't making her a more effective advocate for change. It wasn't increasing her financial contributions to worthy causes. It wasn't inspiring her to take meaningful action. Instead, it was paralyzing her with overwhelm and distracting her from the areas where she could make a genuine difference. This shift from global noise to local presence represents one of the most important psychological transitions of our time. It requires distinguishing between performative awareness versus meaningful engagement. Anna recognized that much of her news consumption had been performative, a way of signaling to herself and others that she was a conscious, caring person. But caring without the capacity for effective action often becomes a form of spiritual narcissism, making us feel virtuous while accomplishing nothing. True engagement requires moving from consumption to creation, from passive absorption to active participation. It means choosing a few causes where you can make a genuine difference, rather than staying superficially informed about every global crisis. Abstract responsibility versus concrete agency. The internet creates a false sense of responsibility for abstract problems. When you read about climate change, political corruption, or social injustice happening thousands of miles away, you may feel responsible for having an opinion, taking a stand, or at least staying informed. But this abstract responsibility often leads to a sense of helplessness rather than empowerment. Concrete agency, by contrast, focuses on what you can actually influence: your own behavior, your immediate community, the relationships in your life, the work you do, the way you treat the people around you. This shift from abstract responsibility to concrete agency is profoundly liberating. Global identity versus local embodiment. Digital culture encourages us to develop a global identity, to see ourselves as citizens of the world, equally connected to events in every corner of the earth. While this perspective has value, it can also lead to a kind of spiritual homelessness, where we feel more connected to distant causes than to our immediate environment. Local embodiment means recognizing that you are a specific person in a specific place at a specific time. Your primary sphere of influence is your own life, your own community, your own corner of the world. This doesn't mean ignoring global issues, but it means understanding your relationship to them in a more grounded, sustainable way. Anna's journey led her to what she came to think of as conscious localism, the practice of focusing primarily on what she could touch, influence, and change, while maintaining appropriate awareness of larger contexts. She still stayed informed about major global developments, but she no longer felt personally responsible for having opinions about every international crisis. She supported causes she cared about through financial contributions and volunteer work, but she no longer felt obligated to consume every piece of information about those causes. Most importantly, she began to understand that her primary contribution to the world's healing might not come through her awareness of global problems, but through her ability to create peace, kindness, and positive change in her immediate environment. The ripple effect of local presence. What Anna discovered, and what research consistently supports, is that local presence creates ripple effects far more powerful than global consumption. When you bring your full attention and care to your immediate relationships and community, you create positive changes that extend far beyond what you can see. The person who is fully present with their children is raising the next generation of conscious humans. The neighbor who organizes community events is strengthening the social fabric that supports everyone. The colleague who brings kindness and integrity to their work is influencing organizational culture in ways that affect dozens or hundreds of other people. These local actions may seem small compared to global crises, but they are actually more impactful because they are real, concrete, and sustainable. They create positive change that compounds over time,
rather than the emotional exhaustion that comes from consuming but not acting on global information.
Anna's transformation culminated in what she called the practice of conscious presence, a way of living that honored both her local reality and her global awareness, without sacrificing either to the other. This practice involved several key elements. Morning intention setting. Rather than beginning each day by consuming information about what was happening in the world, Anna started each morning by connecting with her own intentions and energy. She would spend 10 minutes in meditation or journaling, asking herself, how do I want to show up in the world today? What kind of energy do I want to bring to my interactions? Where can I make a positive difference today? This practice grounded her in her own agency and purpose before exposing herself to external information that might trigger anxiety or overwhelm. Mindful information consumption. When Anna did engage with news and current events, she did so mindfully rather than compulsively. She chose sources known for thoughtful analysis rather than sensationalistic reporting. She looked for articles that provided historical context and potential solutions rather than just documenting problems. Most importantly, she consumed information with a specific purpose: to understand important developments that might affect her life or community, to identify opportunities for positive action, or to gain perspective on her own challenges and experiences. Regular digital detoxes. Anna instituted regular breaks from information consumption, not just her weekly digital Sabbath, but also periodic longer breaks during times of high stress or major life transitions. She discovered that these breaks didn't leave her uninformed about truly important developments, but they did allow her nervous system to reset and her perspective to clarify. Active engagement versus passive consumption. Perhaps most importantly, Anna shifted her relationship with global issues from passive consumption to active engagement. Rather than trying to stay informed about every crisis, she chose 2 or 3 causes that genuinely resonated with her values and talents, and she engaged with them through financial support, volunteer work, and skill sharing. This focused engagement felt infinitely more meaningful than her previous approach of consuming information about dozens of causes without taking action on any of them.
Anna's story is still being written, as is yours. 6 months after her awakening to the mechanics of her digital dependency, she lives differently. Not perfectly. She still occasionally finds herself drawn into reactive scrolling, still sometimes feels the familiar tug of compulsive consumption, but she recognizes these moments now as invitations to return to conscious choice, rather than evidence of personal failure. Her apartment feels different now. Where once the air seemed charged with the anxiety of distant crises, there was now a quality of peace that she had forgotten was possible. Her phone sits charging in the kitchen during meals, silent during conversations, absent from her bedroom at night. The blue light that once painted her face in the early morning hours has been replaced by natural sunlight, filtering through her windows as she practices meditation or writes in her journal. The world beyond her walls continues its ancient dance of creation and destruction, beauty and tragedy, progress and setback. Wars still rage, injustices still persist. Climate change continues its inexorable advance. But Anna's relationship to these realities has fundamentally shifted. She no longer carries the weight of the world's pain as a constant companion. Instead, she carries something far more powerful: the capacity to respond rather than react, to choose rather than be chosen for, to act from wisdom rather than anxiety. She has learned the profound difference between caring about the world and being consumed by it, between staying informed and staying overwhelmed, between global awareness and global absorption. Her empathy, which once felt like a burden, has become a superpower, focused, intentional, and effective rather than scattered and depleting. Thank you for journeying with me through the labyrinth of our scrolling minds, through Anna's transformation from digital dependency to conscious presence. The path she walked is available to you as well. It begins with a simple recognition. The urgency you feel is not always yours. You can choose a different pace, a different rhythm, a different relationship with the information that flows around you. You are not responsible for carrying the world's pain in your pocket. You are not obligated to consume every piece of suffering that the algorithms serve to you. Your worth as a human being is not measured by your awareness of every global crisis or your ability to have opinions about events beyond your influence. Instead, you are invited into something far more profound: the practice of conscious presence, the cultivation of local wisdom, the development of your unique capacity to create positive change in the sphere where you actually have influence. The world needs your presence more than your anxiety, your wisdom more than your worry, your love more than your outrage. It needs you fully here, fully embodied, fully available to the people and possibilities that surround you in this moment. The blue light will always be there, waiting to capture your attention and harvest your peace. The algorithms will continue to evolve, becoming ever more sophisticated in their ability to trigger your ancient fears and modern anxieties. The news cycle will spin on, generating crisis after crisis, emergency after emergency, urgency after urgency. But you have something they cannot touch: the sanctuary of your own consciousness, the sovereignty of your own attention, the power to choose presence over compulsion, wisdom over reactivity, local love over abstract anxiety. If these words have resonated with the deeper wisdom that lives within you, if Anna's journey feels familiar because it mirrors your own, then trust that recognition. The path home to yourself is always available, always beginning now, always as close as your next conscious breath. Remember, you are more than your fears, more than your compulsions, more than the sum of the information you consume. You are the calm in the storm, the peace that no headline can disturb, the love that no crisis can diminish. The world may rage outside, but within you burns a light that no darkness can extinguish. Not the darkness of global tragedy, not the darkness of political division, not even the darkness of your deepest fears. That light is your birthright, your refuge, and your gift to the world.
If these words awakened something deep within you, if Anna's journey mirrors your own longing for digital freedom, then join our growing community of conscious souls. Subscribe now and let us guide you deeper into the art of mindful living.